Why the Iranian protests are anything but organic. Political unrest under authoritarian systems is often interpreted as a prelude to liberation. Historical evidence suggests a more complicated pattern, particularly in states under long-term external pressure. Iran's current protests emerge less from sudden rupture and more from accumulated strain combined with geopolitical opportunity. This analysis does not defend the Iranian government. It evaluates stability, incentives, and downstream consequences. Iran's modern political trajectory begins with the 1951 election of Mohammad Mosaddegh. His removal in the 1953 coup, backed by the Central Intelligence Agency and the British intelligence, reinstalled monarchical rule. The Shah governed through repression while projecting Western cultural alignment. Popular legitimacy collapsed, culminating in the 1979 Islamic Revolution. From that point onward, Iran entered continuous confrontation with the United States. Comprehensive sanctions were imposed almost immediately after the revolution. These sanctions restricted trade, finance, technology transfer, and diplomatic mobility. Iran has lived under near continuous sanctions for approximately 5 decades, or 50 years. Iran is currently the second most sanctioned country globally after Russia, and Iran is also the second longest sanctioned country in history after Cuba. Despite 5 decades of sanctions, Iran has avoided state collapse. It has maintained territorial integrity, centralized authority, and institutional continuity. In comparative terms, the Islamic Republic represents the most stable governing period in Iran's modern history. Previous regimes collapsed through coups, revolutions, or foreign intervention. This stability has persisted under conditions that have fractured many other states. But internal pressure does not equal imminent collapse. As sanctions have produced inflation, infrastructure decay, and declining living standards, Iran is simultaneously experiencing severe water crisis. These pressures generate predictable protest cycles. Protests emerge under these conditions reflect strain, not necessarily revolutionary viability. Stability under pressure often produces unrest without producing regime replacement. In 2025, snapback sanctions were reimposed following the collapse of the nuclear negotiations. This occurred after Iran absorbed economic and security costs from the 12-day conflict involving Israel. Pressure increased at a moment of strategic vulnerability, and Reza Pahlavi renewed calls for regime change. Older generations remain wary due to memories of monarchical authoritarianism. But let's talk about the power vacuum precedent. Regime collapse does not reliably produce democratic outcomes. Recent examples include Syria, Libya, Haiti, and Myanmar. So power vacuums tend to generate militarization, fragmentation, and prolonged instability. Civil populations often fare worse after state collapse than under constrained stability, and Iran's continuity has so far prevented these outcomes. So what's the strategic value here? Iran occupies a central position in the Eurasian geography. It functions as a logistic corridor for China's Belt and Road Initiative, and it is a strategic partner to Russia, including military-industrial cooperation. Destabilizing Iran weakens multiple non-Western alignments simultaneously. U.S. sanctions operate through institutions such as the IMF, the World Bank, and SWIFT. The BRICS project aims to reduce this leverage, and alternating banking and settlement systems are emerging. Iran's integration into these systems threatens existing sanctions power structures. So protest amplification is a pretext to a good strategy. Modern protest movements rarely remain informationally neutral. Digital amplification shapes narratives, leadership figures, and international perception. External actors benefit from framing unrest as imminent regime failure. This framing provides justification for escalation, sanctions expansion, or military action. Protest visibility becomes a pretext for further confrontation rather than reform. But the strategic reality is, there's no available pathway that offers a clean transition. Regime collapse risks fragmentation. Leadership decapitation risks military rule. Sustained destabilization risks regional war. And relative stability, however constrained, currently minimizes catastrophic outcomes. So Iran's protests cannot be reduced to moral binaries. They exist at the intersection of sanctions, geopolitics, and systemic power competition. Stability under siege is not legitimacy, but it's survival. There are no clean outcomes here. Regime collapse risks fragmentation and warlordism. Leadership decapitation risks military rule, and sustained destabilization risks regional chaos. Paradoxically, The status quo, combined with gradual sanctions erosion through multipolar institutions, offers the least catastrophic trajectory for ordinary Iranians. That doesn't just make it just, but it makes it survivable, unfortunately. Iran's protests cannot be understood through moral simplicity. They sit at the intersection of history, sanctions, energy politics, and great power competition. So for my next analysis, I can show you how warlords and warfare shapes post-narratives globally, and why organic movements are increasingly rare in the digital age. The conversation is ongoing. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Peace.